The time is 7 o'clock. Good evening and bonsoir. I'd like to call this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Ms. Colasetti,
Here.
Ms. Bishop,
Here.
Ms. Grace Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
The first item is to approve the minutes of the previous meetings. There are 3 sets of minutes, one from 8/1/2022, a public hearing, one from 8/15/2022, and one from 9/6/2022. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Are there any additions or corrections? I noticed one correction for 8:15. It says the chair was Mary Alice, and it should have been Grace. Lower down, where it says it was called to order by chair. Okay. Any other corrections? All right. Can we do a voice vote on that one? All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Next is additions to the agenda. We do have one change. Item F, under old business, ordinance number 2022-09-036, an ordinance approving a major variance, parking at 1009 Stoughton Street, case number ZBA 2022 MAG-04, is going to be rescheduled and is being removed from the agenda for tonight. Next, we have a presentation, visitors from Thionville, France, the Illinois Sister Cities Association's 2022 Champions of Youth Awardees, council members Bishop and Wu.
This evening, we have former Councilman Dennis Roberts and Chair of the Sister Cities Association to introduce our visitors from France and present the award.
Yes, hello, City Council members, the Mayor, Carol Mitten, City Administrator, and City Clerk. It's my pleasure to share with you some exciting news for the city and for the community. The Illinois Sister Cities Association, which is a statewide group, has selected a project of communication between students in Urbana and students in Thionville, France, our sister city, as being of such an excellent quality in the last year during the difficulties and the challenges of a year of limited meetings and limited travel, as the champion of youth for 2022. And we were just in Chicago this last weekend at the Illinois Municipal League meeting, where we did a presentation in front of the associates and the representatives of all the cities of Illinois, and awarded with the award of the Champion of Youth Award to our local school district teacher Linda Lopez from Uni High School, and Marianne Andriot, who is here to represent the city of Thionville, and she has brought her family with her, her husband Benoit, her sons Raphael, and it's Raphael's birthday today, and Joachim, and they are here, and I would like now to present them a copy of the award, and I would also have an award copy for the city of Urbana, so I'd like to have Mayor Marlin receive that. So, would you please come forward? You have received a plaque for this to take back to the city of Thionville, but this plaque, this is in French, is the plaque which the Illinois Sister City Association is presenting to you and your school. Thank you. and Mayor Marlin. Now, we've already presented a plaque for Uni High School at the conference, but this plaque, Mayor, is for the city of Urbana for having such an excellent program. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I also have some items relating to the history of our community, a book about the history of Urbana, a commemorative calendar from our 175th anniversary, and a book about the Sister Cities program, which I'm going to present to Marie-Ange.
Merci.
Okay.
Merci.
And so Marie-Ange and her students have sent to her a small PowerPoint program which she would like to play. And would Linda Lopez please come forward too? Linda is the teacher who represented Uni High School. Without her assistance, this project and interrelationship couldn't have been completed. So we appreciate your help so much. And if you want to talk just a little bit, maybe for 2 or 3 minutes about the program or what you experienced, and then we're going to look at the PowerPoint, okay?
I'm short, I'm sorry. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. Last year was a fun year for our students to be able to experience an exchange with a school in France, since we haven't been able to travel since 2018. And it gives them an opportunity to try their skills at French and learn things that I might not teach them in the classroom, that they can learn through their peers in France. And we are hoping that if things can work properly, that possibly this spring her students might come for about a 10-day visit and be hosted by our families at school. And then we are hoping that in 2024 we might be able to go to France, and we've been invited to be hosted by their families and continue our trips as we have in the past. So it's a good start, and she will meet the new batch of French 4 students tomorrow, and we will try to meet last year's group during lunchtime if we can get them all together. So thank you for the opportunity.
Marie-Ange, do you want to make a comment? Yes? Yeah. Well, start here and then go.
So I have a few words for you. Dear Mayor, Diane Marlin, and dear councillors, and dear Urbana community. This is such a pleasure and an honor to finally being able to meet all of you in person and not virtually. I want to thank all of you, and especially Dennis Roberts and his wife, Ilona, for welcoming us so warmly and organizing so well our stay, first in Chicago, then in Urbana. I'm also so happy to find a new colleague and a friend overseas, Linda Lopez, thanks to the Town Hall of Thionville and his Comité de Jumelage, represented by Mr. Felici, and the Sister City Association here in Urbana. Thanks to Linda, everything seems possible when she encourages the students and I. So that's a very positive point. I also wanted to thank Jay Marther, the president of the Illinois Sister Cities Association, who encourages international relations and allowed us to receive the Illinois Youth Award 2022. Well, the American dream is taught to students in France in books. And some students usually think it's an old and boring story they have to study. But for most of them, when we speak about the American dream, we can see that their eyes shining with joy. Since the beginning of this school exchange, everything has been different. The exchanges we have between Uni High and the Lycée Charlemagne in Thionville have boosted our motivation for both my students and I. It's 10,000 times easier for my students to get their work done in a short time. And even now, since I'm there. We finally realized that every subject we study can be shared with our pen friends, from ecology to daily routine. And I also brought new letters here from my 20 students who started the exchange last year, and from new students. They are in a section called English Euro class, and I only see them 1 hour a week. So we work during that time on exchange projects. Everybody knows in my school that I had the chance to discover the amazing Chicago, and now to be with you in person. So my headmaster, Mr. Pietron, and all the directors are also encouraging this exchange, which is also very important for me to continue and to go further in this exchange. Students were so excited for me, but couldn't be more thrilled than my family and I, of course. They are all dreaming to come and visit you. We are so cheerful to discover your state, Illinois, your urban area, and your countryside on the road to Urbana. Again, I'm so grateful to all the people who contribute to make this adventure possible. We've got a lot to learn from you, from each other, and some common issues to tackle with, such as discrimination, racism, which is still up to date. America is a land of opportunities where everything is big and possible. And I believe that one day students from Thionville will meet in person students from Urbana for a better world. I will show you now the PowerPoints that my students prepared in a very short time, since school has just started, and they were so motivated, so they made it. Okay, I'm going to show you.
So we're hoping this will only take a few minutes. If you would extend our time period. And these are just received from the students. Are you ready?
Yes, we are also working with an American assistant, sometimes Canadian last year, and this year we'll have an English assistant from Oxford. So she's coming next week. Okay, so we can listen to some students here.
Hello, we are
Nathan,
Aurore and Charlotte, and we are going to present to you the exchange with our pen friends in Urbana. In October 2021, an exchange began between our high school, Charlemagne High School in Thionville, and Uni High in Urbana. Those cities are sister cities. Do you know how Thionville and Urbana became sister cities?
Elise Poyot is a teacher in the University of Luxembourg who lives in Thionville. One day she traveled to the University of Illinois in Urbana, and she noticed many similarities between Urbana and Thionville. So she suggested to bind Thionville and Urbana.
on the 15th of November 2014, everybody in Thionville was very excited to attend the twinning celebration between Urbana and Thionville, the two sister cities. Thanks to this twinning, a lot of Thionville's and Urbana's inhabitants were able to achieve many projects together, like the one we have the great opportunity to live.
Hello, I'm Jude and I'm going to talk about letters. So last year we began the exchange with our pen friends of Urbana by sharing letters together. We chose one subject to discuss about and we presented ourselves and Thionville so the American students get to know us more. Our correspondents helped us to prepare this day by giving us their opinions on Europe on Flipgrid.
That's it. Okay.
Our pen friends
friends from Urbana created a blog where they told them their life in the United States, at school, and more about French class. Their blog was very pretty and very funny. How they speak French was very impressive for us.
Our Euroclass created too a blog to share our projects, our life in Charlemagne High School, and the school, the sports, and the university in France.
Hello, my name is Guillaume and today I'm going to speak about the cooking recipe book. Last year, the Euroclass of Charlemagne and the University of Illinois Laboratory High School made a cooking recipe book. It's an e-book available on the blog and composed of 72 pages. You can find the blog at the link www.charlemagne-thionville.fr. All the recipes are green and sustainable. It's very important for us because our exchange between Thionville and Urbana is also based on the environment and the natural products. Besides, the recipes are typical of our region, so it's a good idea to share our cultures.
Last year, on January 3rd, 2022, we watched a play about Rosa Parks in Thionville. Briefly, Rosa Parks was a black woman on a segregated bus who refused to give up her seat to a white man. She was arrested for this. This led to the black people from Montgomery, Alabama, to boycott the bus company. And this is a big progress in the fight against racial segregation in the United States.
So we watched the play, but the Americans didn't, and then we had a talk with them about Rosa Parks and the play, and after that they had to answer questions about it, like was Rosa Parks a hero or was the bus driver responsible for his action, even if he was just following the law.
This year, we made another project with the Euroclass. We went to the Kulturfabrik. The Kulturfabrik is situated in Esch-sur-Alzette in Luxembourg. At first, we went to the Kulturfabrik with another class, a Luxembourg class. During this day, we had seen a place where artists can create their works and they also can make representations. This place also hosts shows and concerts, and there is also a cinema. At the end of the day, we had the chance to see a play about 7 immigrants and their history. They all came from different countries. This play was played by only one woman. There was many sound effects and it was played on the floor. It was a very good experience.
During the year, we read the play Hamlet by Shakespeare. Then we met the Kulturfabrik's actors in order to prepare a new version of the play based on Ophelia. In June, we went during a 1 week in Luxembourg when we finished the play. Friday, we played the result in front of 100 people. It was very stressful, but it's the most amazing thing that I did last year.
Hi, I am one of the news in this Euroclass. I'm happy to be a part of this project. I can't wait to get to you to talk to you. When I chose to do Euro English, it was to improve my English and be able to interact with people from English-speaking countries. So this project really motivates me.
Hi, my name is Ines. I would like to be a part of this project because it looks very interesting and I didn't have the opportunity to do it last years. However, this project looks incredible.
As a conclusion, we can say that our Euroclass is involved and wants to learn more about English countries because we made a lot of projects last year with our pen friends. The letters exchange, presentation of our cities,
Flipgrid, the Rosa Parks play, the cooking book recipes, and the Europe Day. We are very interested by all these grateful projects. We really want to share our language and to speak English with our pen friends. Moreover, this year we have new American pen friends and new students in our class. It's a very good opportunity to make new friends and to realize new ideas. Enjoy!
Thank you for taking time during the council meeting to experience a little bit of the friendship with our global partners in Thionville. And we hope to come back again sometime to tell you more about it and perhaps invite you to travel with us to Thionville someday.
Thank you. I would like to clap you and clap everybody here who really, everybody who has helped this project and who will help it in the future, because I think we need each of you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, and congratulations. We'll let folks get settled. The next item on our agenda is public comment. So if you would like to address the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole, please come up to the microphone and state your name. Thank you.
Hello? Yeah. Hi. My name's Julie Watkins. I'm a resident of Urbana. And I was wanting to talk about some stuff from last week. From what I understood, and this is about the ARPA funds and the application process. And I hope that the Public Works proposal for the Dr. Ellis subdivision, because that it comes out that they are the ones who are supposed to be doing, the person who's, the group that's doing the work should be doing that. I think what I understand is that if you're going to go, that the city should establish cleanouts at the sidewalks, if that's the right word, so that no Dr. Ellis subdivision owner is responsible for laterals underneath pavement, because the original blueprints for that subdivision indicated that the lines would be underneath grass, not pavement. And that since it was okayed and not changed in whatever, it seems like this is the most equitable thing, so that if there's a problem, everybody would be responsible for the same sort, so there would be equity. And I understand they've been talking about there are vacancies in Public Works, but that could also be addressed with the ARPA funds, and infrastructure and sewers and stuff has been part of what was that ARPA's funds are designated for. So I'm looking, I would like to see that happen, because it should happen. And I also had a comment about the parking last week. That there seems to be, there is a congestion problem about parking, and if the landlord is going to, the builder is going to save money by not having to build on stilts, it would be good to, the best way to not increase congestion and that having an effect on the neighborhood is if the parking comes with the rent, and then it's taking into account the community. And so I'm glad that people were talking about that, and I hope you all will, at any rate, thank you for your consideration of all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the Committee of the Whole? Please state your name for the record.
Hello, everyone. Scott Dossett. I always like to start these with thanks for all of the work that you all do for our city. And with a special thanks to Chris Evans. I had an animal control problem in our neighborhood, and I didn't really understand how the system had changed. We have a feral cat problem in Urbana, and Chris got back to me, and I got a real good response from the people at Champaign County who are now responsible to that, and I guess contract with us all to make that happen. So that's the first thing is a thanks. The second thing is to remind you that the Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots Festival is just about 1 month away. Gigs are booked, venues are set, and on the 20th of October we will begin for 3 nice nights of music. And the city, of course, and the council provides significant support to Folk and Roots every year, and I just want to thank you all for that.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the committee as a whole? Seeing no further comments. Next, we have a staff report, Florida Avenue Corridor Study Findings and Final Recommendations, Public Works and CCRPC.
While they're getting set up, I'll just do a brief introduction. This is Ashley McLaughlin and J.D. McClanahan from Champaign-Urbana Regional Planning Commission. They've been some of the leads on working us through this Florida Avenue corridor study, and we've kind of talked about this very high level to this point, but what we want to do now is try to bring them in so that they can just provide a little bit better detail for everybody on the findings and the other things that have come out of this and some of the questions that have come out of council in the past to kind of go through some of this stuff in a little bit better detail. Do you guys need a minute? Okay. That's fine. I'll just talk a little bit about the Florida Avenue corridor study, where it started and where we ended up. The study itself was funded through a research and planning grant through the state, where they fully funded the cost of the corridor study that RPC has performed for this. Some of the main things along this corridor that need addressed are safety conditions of infrastructure along these roadways and proper accommodations for all modes of transportation through this corridor. Florida Avenue is one of our main arterials here in Urbana. It sees upwards of 10,000 average daily traffic daily. Hopefully with the increase of bicycle facilities through the shared use path that's been discussed on this and some other things, we'll be able to enhance some other usages of this as well. When we started this, the original extents were Vine Street to Lincoln, and as we looked at this, we decided to extend that down to the Wright Street extended because the condition of the pavement in that same area had some of the same issues that we were seeing throughout the rest of the Florida corridor, and it had just as much traffic in that area. So we looked at that, and when we looked at that, we identified some additional safety concerns in that area too, which justified this. And this year, I guess, we worked together with MTD and RPC to pursue the RAISE grant because reconstruction of this corridor is beyond the capabilities of our finances in our 5-year plan by itself. So we originally had this slated in with the CUATs, the Metropolitan Planning Organizations. We get a block of funding because we're in an MPO to spend on regional transportation priorities, and this is one of the regional transportation priorities. At the time, it was really just funded at about $3 million, and it was budgeted at about $4 million. And where we ended up, when we looked at the side path and full reconstruction, extending the extents and everything, we're upwards of $12 million for full reconstruction of this section at this point. So Certainly extended, dependent upon where we land. We did pursue the RAISE grant, which we were unsuccessful in this attempt. Some of the things that we intend to kind of do moving forward is, I think, continue to pursue grant opportunities for this, and we think it is important. We are also pursuing a Lincoln corridor study through similar safety grant programs that if we are able to complete that corridor study, these would be contiguous from Lincoln from Florida to Greene, with this potentially for next year's round of funding to pursue again. The SS4A is another thing that we're pursuing for North Lincoln right now, and that would be another pool of money that potentially this could be in contention for in future years as well. So we're looking through some of those options, and with grants, we talked about during council goals, the idea being that we need to be more prepared, and being prepared is us spending some money up front on, the grant opportunities, working with people like RPC to perform these corridor studies, and then, even potentially stepping into some phase 1, phase 2 design, conceptual engineering and design engineering to make us closer to shovel ready, which is a big trigger for grant funding. So we're working through all that. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in the RAISE grant opportunity, but the hope is that we'll be able to be more prepared for the next round of funding opportunities for this type of project. Florida Avenue, I guess the other thing I should point out, as far as our transportation project priority, it is the top priority, but is such an immense project that if we don't have grant funding, we're either looking at value engineering it substantially or cutting the majority of our other projects through our 5-year CIP, which are also great needs for us.
For community members, we're having a font issue with the presentation that's being resolved.
Sorry about that. Yeah, our default PowerPoint fonts are not on the city computers. So good to see y'all again for the third time this month for a different project this time. So we're here to talk about the Florida Avenue corridor study and kind of the completed draft of this project and kind of the process for getting here and the recommendations that QOTS has arrived at. In terms of kind of structure for this presentation, first we're going to talk through kind of the existing conditions and context at Florida Avenue, and then the first round of public outreach, followed by future scenarios that we projected and modeled in-house, and then the second round of public outreach, followed by recommendations and implementations and next steps. So the first section will be focusing on existing conditions and context. So in general, I think the general kind of scope or summary of this project is it was a study of the corridor of Florida Avenue from Lincoln Avenue to Vine Street, which is a major east-west corridor for our area, serving Urbana and the university, connecting a variety of land uses, and also with use by all major transportation modes, which includes pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, passenger vehicles, as well as freight vehicles. And this project was grant funded by the statewide planning and research funds from the Federal Highway Administration and also from Illinois Department of Transportation. So to continue the kind of general overview of the of the existing context, looking at road conditions on this section of Florida Avenue, road conditions for the majority of Florida Avenue were rated very poor. Due to the kind of evolution in the use of this corridor over time, this area has significantly more access points than recommended. So given the amount of traffic on this corridor, the frequency of side streets and driveways and things like that are kind of not in alignment with its current use. Average daily traffic along the corridor is as high as 10,000 vehicles per day. In 2017, IDOT identified the Race and Florida intersection as a top 5% priority safety location for our district. This intersection saw the most crashes resulting in injury along the whole corridor during the study period, and also saw the only severe injury crash during the study period. The fact that it's the most frequent injury on this corridor is notable because the Lincoln intersection has nearly twice as many daily vehicles on this corridor. So the fact that Race in Florida had more injury crashes and more severe injury crashes is definitely notable and something to address. Looking at bike and pedestrian infrastructure, there are no bike facilities between Lincoln Avenue and Race Street, and in the same stretch, there are sidewalks only on the north side of the street. Along this corridor, the level of traffic stress, which kind of measures the experience of navigating a roadway for different users, for cyclists, that level of traffic stress is high between Lincoln and Race, and then medium between Race and Vine. And similarly, the pedestrian level of traffic stress fluctuates between medium and high stress along the corridor. So next we're going to talk about the first round of public outreach. So the first public outreach took place in the summer and fall of 2021 and was kind of centered around an online survey that we created. We used a variety of outreach strategies, including social media flyers and social media content for community partners, yard signs and door hangers along Florida on the corridor, discussions with local media, as well as tabling at Orchard Downs for Bike to Work Day last year. And from this, we received 434 total responses. A few kind of major takeaways from these responses. When respondents were asked what they liked about the current condition of this corridor, neighborhood character was kind of the most frequent response. So people appreciated the aesthetic character of the neighborhood, the greenery, and kind of the experience for residents of the area. People also appreciated roadway function, so valuing the fact that there was this transportation asset in the area. And kind of the next most common theme was people answering this required question with nothing because they were fed up and couldn't think of anything positive to say about the corridor, which is notable as we look at the next slide, which is what do residents not like about the current conditions in this corridor. The most frequent complaint that people had here was about bike and pedestrian facilities, where more than half of respondents mentioned that that bike and pedestrian facilities needed to be improved in the corridor. Similarly, nearly half of respondents noted the poor physical conditions and maintenance, either of the road itself, of the sidewalk, or of other infrastructure. And then the current state of the intersections along the corridor was another major theme. So at Lincoln, this included issues with the turn lane at that intersection. People questioned the necessity of the signal at Orchard. And then the most frequent responses were at Race and Vine, with people talking about the confusion that results from the current all-way stops at those intersections, which result in congestion, safety issues. People talking about the danger of rolling stops at these stop signs, as well as having issues with the turn radii at these intersections, resulting in large vehicles like buses and trucks not being able to navigate these intersections well. So next I'm going to talk about the future scenarios and modeling that the staff worked on for this corridor. These scenarios are based on the Champaign County travel demand model, which is a regional population and employment model that's been approved by regional governments, that was developed for the long-range transportation plan for our region. This model predicts the future vehicle traffic volume on the local road network. And while this model does not incorporate bike and pedestrian traffic, and so it doesn't tell the entire story, it is an important component of kind of predicting future use of this corridor. So to talk about that future modeling, we're just going to do a quick definition of intersection level of service, which is basically looking at how an intersection or a segment of roadway is functioning for users. This ranges from A, which is the best, to F, which is the worst. And as you can see here, A represents kind of at segments, free-flowing traffic with average travel speeds. At intersections, there's minimal delay, whereas F represents extremely low speed, congestion, high delays, high volume, long lines, and higher emissions from cars that are idling in traffic. Of these rankings, A through D are generally considered acceptable levels of service, while E and F are unacceptable. So that kind of brings us into the analysis both of the current conditions of the intersections along this corridor as well as the projected future conditions. The first diagram you can see on top left is existing conditions as measured from 2017 through 2018. So you can see here most of the intersections here are kind of fair to middling in terms of level of service. On the lower end of acceptable, with the exception of Race in Florida, which during the afternoon kind of peak traffic hour goes all the way to F, the worst level of service. And I should mention these diagrams are looking both at the morning peak traffic hour and the afternoon peak traffic hour. So those are the two rows that you see with each diagram. The second diagram on the left that you can see is basically the projected conditions with population change through 2045 if we don't do anything to the intersections. So you can see kind of the situation deteriorates with several of the intersections going to the bottom end of acceptable, and then Race in Florida being unacceptable in both morning and afternoon peak hours. And then following that, you can see the kind of 4 different scenarios that were projected for changes on this corridor. So the first would be signalizing every intersection along this corridor, which you can see there's minor improvements on the west side of the corridor where there's already signals, and then significant improvements on the east side of the corridor where it would be converting from stop signs. And then the remaining scenarios are looking at if roundabouts were implemented in this corridor. So scenario 2 is looking at if all of the intersections of this corridor were converted into roundabouts. Scenario 3 is looking at if Lincoln was preserved as a signal and the other 3 were converted to roundabouts. And then finally, scenario 4 is keeping the 2 traffic lights, the 2 traffic signals in the corridor, and then converting Race and Vine into roundabouts. So you can see here both the conversion into signalized intersections throughout the corridor as well as roundabouts were both pretty good improvements of level of service above the kind of no build scenario as well as above the existing conditions on the corridor. So with that level of service consideration taken into account, the staff and the working group needed to determine if we were recommending that roundabouts be pursued along this corridor. And ultimately, after considering and working within the group, roundabouts were not recommended for several reasons. The first reason is geometric constraints, just looking at the space at the intersections along this corridor. So several of the intersections along this corridor, building roundabouts of the proper size would require either expanding the right-of-way and taking up neighboring property. In some cases, not just taking up a section of yard, but basically taking up a substantial portion of the lot where the homeowner would likely have to vacate their property. And then alternatively, if we made the roundabouts small enough that was not the case, buses and large trucks would not be able to navigate around the roundabouts and would likely need to drive over the middle of the roundabout. Because there's significant bus and freight traffic along the corridor, having this done frequently would cause confusion on kind of how to use these roundabouts and reduce the safety benefits here. Looking at the kind of economic constraints, a life cycle cost analysis was conducted using the Vine intersection as the example, just because that had fewer space constraints and some of those issues that I just talked about. Based on that analysis, the cost for kind of implementing roundabouts, looking at planning, construction, and operations, was estimated at $2.26 million, whereas for implementing a signalized intersection, it was estimated at $814,000. Looking at the benefits calculated in this analysis, which included travel time, there were societal benefits that included travel time, safety, and environmental benefits. Roundabouts resulted in 50% more societal benefits, but at a cost nearly 3 times higher than the signalized intersection. And when it was kind of calculated, signals had a societal benefit to cost ratio of 8 to 1, while roundabouts had a benefit to cost ratio of 4 to 1 for every dollar spent. Looking at safety considerations, research indicates that roundabouts provide slight safety benefits for vehicles over signalized intersections, but safety benefits for bike and pedestrian users are kind of inconclusive due to a variety of factors that include possibly increased crossing distances, lack of designated phases for pedestrians, and cyclists likely needing to navigate into the flow of traffic at the roundabout. And just as we were conducting this analysis, just needing to acknowledge that each intersection has different kind of on-the-ground constraints that warrant consideration when considering implementation. And finally, on considering roundabouts, public sentiment was something that we did want to consider throughout the process. And throughout this process, roundabouts have had strong proponents, but their very strong support was not necessarily reflected in the public feedback that we received. In the first round of public feedback, we had 5% of respondents that mentioned roundabouts at all, and I think about 3% that mentioned them kind of unequivocally positively. And then the second round, there were 8% of respondents that were advocating for roundabouts. So while there are strong proponents, that strong sentiment was not necessarily reflected across the board. So ultimately, the working group made the decision that the first major roundabout in Champaign-Urbana should be easy to navigate for all modes in a consistent manner, and the constraints along Florida Avenue did not really make that a feasible opportunity for this to be the case. With that said, I will turn it over to Ashley to talk about what the second round of public outreach and what we are recommending.
Okay, so I'm going to go through our overarching recommendations for this study, and at the same time...
Is your mic on?
Yes. Can you hear me? Am I just not close enough? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the overarching recommendations for the study, and at the same time, I'm going to try to cover our second round of public input, which was in direct response to these recommendations proposed. And I think I'm going to end up using our website because my slides are unusable. So first, I know you can't read all of this, so I'm not going to get into the screen, but I'm just going to say this is one of the diagrams we used in our public involvement to try to illustrate all of the improvements that we sorted by mode on the website. So I think I have, it probably won't work. Let me just see. Okay. Okay, so starting with pedestrian improvements, we looked at, for the public involvement, we presented members of the public with the issues. Like I said, we separated them by mode, and then we presented them with the issues related to pedestrians that we heard from the public, but also that we found in the data, and then what recommendations were relevant to each of those issues. So without my summary slides, I'm going to try to go through this.
Can you stop scrolling it up and down so much? We're trying to read that. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to try to summarize this relatively quickly. which will be difficult if you're reading all of the words. Let me think about this for a sec. I'm going to switch screens to one with less words. And we're going to go recommendation by recommendation. So first, add an off-street shared use path on the south side of Florida Avenue between Lincoln Avenue and Ray Street to improve safety and accessibility for pedestrians and cyclists. This is a project you're familiar with. I know the city has proposed a couple of grants to look for funding for this particular project. This is a project that dates back to previous plans, which is why it's well prepared to ask for funding. It's reflected in the 2020 Urbana Pedestrian Master Plan, the 2016 Bicycle Master Plan, and also in this plan, as it addresses a lot of needs that have come up in the past in terms of closing bicycle and pedestrian gaps and making bicycling and walking safer along the corridor. So one question that we got was, why not add bike lanes in this section as opposed to moving cyclists off-street? One reason for that is that there is a lot of traffic on this corridor, and the bike lanes don't continue west of Lincoln Avenue. So in our opinion, it was a safer approach to transition cyclists on and off street at the Ray Street intersection rather than the Lincoln Avenue intersection, which is larger and which also has a short merge lane just east of the intersection that a lot of people complained about. So that is one main proposal for addressing bicyclists and pedestrians in that section, is to add an off-street shared use path on the south side where there are currently no sidewalks or bicycle facilities. I'm going to scroll. Brace yourselves. Number 2, upgrade lighting throughout the corridor to improve safety and accessibility for all users. This is pretty straightforward. There's not consistent lighting throughout the corridor, so just one thing we wanted to include when thinking about upgrades, comprehensive upgrades along the corridor to improve lighting and make it consistent throughout for all modes, so for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. I'm going to scroll again. Third, replace damaged sidewalk panels throughout the corridor to improve pedestrian safety and accessibility. So again, this is pretty straightforward. In this section, there are some ADA compliance issues in terms of vertical faults or cracks, as well as some sloping that can be corrected, and so we want to improve that for people walking and wheelchairs especially. This is one that got a lot of public support, as well as lighting, as well as the side path. Next, we have reconstruct the roadway from Lincoln Avenue to Vine Street to improve safety and accessibility for existing vehicle lanes and on-street bike lanes that are east of Ray Street, including crosswalk repainting and sidewalk ramp reconstruction. So the existing roadway conditions, like we've already discussed, are currently in poor condition. So one good improvement for everyone's use, but also for safety, is to improve the roadway condition and not let it deteriorate further. Next, this also got a lot of public support, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Next, we have add bus cutouts to prevent traffic obstruction at the Florida Avenue intersection with Orchard Street on the southeast corner and Vine Street on the northwest corner at Blair Park. Cutouts will include concrete landing pads and shelters for bus riders. So this is something we didn't anticipate going into the study, but some of the public input and some of the congestion issues had to do with so many different vehicles using the corridor and buses taking up entire lanes and there not being enough room to go around, et cetera. So one proposal we discussed with the steering committee that MTD proposed was to introduce some cutouts so that buses could pull off at 2 of the heaviest bus stops in the corridor and make traveling in those particular locations safer for bus riders, but also for the vehicles in the corridor. Next, we have add a parking lane on the north side of Florida Avenue between Busey Avenue and Ray Street within the existing roadway width without adding additional pavement. So this is more of a controversial one that there was a lot of support for, but there was also the most concern about from the public. And I'll go over those numbers with you after we go through these improvements. The proposal here is to add a parking lane where a parking lane used to exist between Busey and Ray Street for a few reasons. One is because it used to be there and there was kind of an informal agreement with residents along that corridor that it would be added back once roadway conditions were improved to allow that parking lane to be reintroduced. Another reason was that considering the amount of travel, the existing safety issues, and the potential to add new signals at the intersections, one way to reduce speed in this corridor would be to reduce the roadway width, which the parking lane would effectively do in that section. So it can function as somewhat of a traffic calming device by reducing the roadway width. It also allows for, because like JD mentioned earlier, there are so many access points along that roadway, so many driveways, and as well as smaller streets. It allows a little bit more of a buffer for people entering and exiting driveways. It also allows a little bit more space for delivery vehicles and other service vehicles needing to use the roadway. They can pull off and not obstruct an entire lane of traffic on the north side there. Next, we have, and just so you know, I think there's 9 of these, maybe 10, so we're almost done. 7 is upgrade existing traffic signals, including crosswalk signals at the Florida Avenue intersections with Lincoln Avenue and Orchard Street to improve functionality. So these are just upgrades to the existing signals at Lincoln and Orchard. The purpose of this, when thinking about a comprehensive upgrade for the corridor, is to be able to modernize the signals and add functionality like including accessible or audible pedestrian signals and push-button devices, allowing for vehicle and bicycle detection, and providing an opportunity to implement traffic signal priority and preemption for emergency vehicles. Excuse me. So this would be just a modernization to the existing signals to improve functionality for all modes. Next, we have adding new signals at the intersections of Ray Street and Vine Street to improve safety and traffic flow. So these are where there are currently all-way stops, particularly at the Race and Florida intersection where we have the greatest safety concerns, to clarify movement in that particular intersection. So stoplights will provide some clarity for what are currently, I believe it's 9 potential approaches, and also allow dedicated time for pedestrians and provide some clarity just for movement in that and improve safety for that particular intersection, as well as the other features that I mentioned in the other signals for pedestrians and bicycles. Number 9 is to consolidate bus stops between Lincoln Avenue and Vine Street to improve route efficiency. So there are currently 14 stops along this corridor. The proposal is to reduce it to 12 to move some around a little bit, get rid of 2 that are the lowest performing or have the lowest amount of traffic, but this would still allow for bus stops to be within 600 feet or 2 blocks of where they currently are. So there's not a lot of gaps missing. It's consistent with other bus stop spacing in the region, but just to make the corridor a little bit more efficient. And then lastly, this is for bikes in particular, to add two-stage turn-queue boxes at the Florida Avenue intersection with Ray Street to help cyclists transition between on-street bike lanes and off-street shared-use paths. So this is a mechanism that is used in other places in the community to just help clarify the position and movement of bicycles at intersections, particularly at this intersection where, like I said, there would be a transition between the on-street lanes and the off-street shared-use path. This was also a recommendation that was taken from the Urbana Bicycle Master Plan from 2016. So those are all of the overarching recommendations that were in that black graphic I showed. And I'm just going to briefly go through the public response to those. Whoops. Which can be summarized mostly in one graphic. So I'm going to scroll again, forgive me. Here. Just to demonstrate levels of support for the different proposals. So the question was, we presented all of the recommendations. We asked people which of these recommendations do you support and which ones do you have concern about. So this goes from top to bottom, from the most support to the most concern at the bottom. So I won't focus too much on the ones with a lot of support, replacing damaged sidewalk panels, adding the off-street shared use path, reconstructing the roadway. Those are our top three. They get a lot of public support and very little concern. Upgrading lighting throughout the corridor. This also received a lot of support. The concern mostly had to do with people being concerned about what style of lighting would be added, but people were generally in favor of it, upgrading the lighting for all modes. Next, we have upgrade traffic signals, the existing traffic signals. That got majority support, but also some concern. People wondering about what's the best use of the intersection, being concerned about bicyclists and pedestrians, just wanting to make sure that all the modes would still be able to function safely at the intersections. Consolidating bus stops, some people were alarmed by that language of consolidating bus stops, but like I said, there's still very favorable spacing throughout the corridor in terms of the level of service for bus riders and the distance between bus stops. We can look at a map if anyone has questions about that. Adding bus cutouts, there was 16% concern about that one, but still majority support. Some people were concerned about if buses were pulled off the roadway, would that encourage more speeding along the corridor if there weren't those obstructions there to force people to stop occasionally. Here we have for the two-stage turn queue boxes for bicyclists at the Florida Avenue and Ray Street intersection. There was 49% support, but also 17% concern. A lot of people with concerns were unfamiliar with this treatment or didn't think this was the best treatment, maybe had, a different treatment they thought would be more effective based on their own use of bicycling along the corridor. Here, second to last, we have the new traffic signals. It still got majority support, but it also had a lot of people concerned about would it increase speed throughout the corridor? Would it actually increase safety? Would, roundabouts be better, or would just leaving it as an always stop be better than signals? People were mostly worried about increasing speed throughout the corridor. And then lastly, there was not a great deal of support for adding the parking lane, and there was actually more concern than support for adding the parking lane. I already went through the reasons why we are proposing adding the parking lane. This doesn't necessarily clearly or obviously benefit a lot of people if we're just thinking about adding parking for those adjacent properties, but like I said, it does have some other benefits, like calming traffic and providing that extra buffer for adjacent properties and also delivery vehicles in the corridor. So that is a summary of the recommendations that are proposed, as well as a summary of the response or the public responses to those recommendations. With the help of the working group, we went through the public input and the recommendations again and kept all of the recommendations that were originally proposed. Added some additional information to the website to clarify kind of why, we were proposing different things. We didn't anticipate, we didn't know what people would be kind of for or against necessarily. We had a pretty good idea based on the first round of public input. So we added a little bit more information about, the traffic signal proposal, the parking lane, et cetera. But this is our summary, and the working group decided to move forward with the original recommendations that were proposed. So lastly, I'm just gonna say that the last part of the website that we haven't gone over is the implementation portion. Trying to get through this so we can have plenty of time for questions. So in terms of implementation, we lay out all of the recommendations with some additional justifications. We look at kind of a proposed timeline for implementation. Ideally, everything would just be implemented all at once with a huge pot of money, but that's rarely available. So what should be done first and in what particular sequence? And then some funding options are proposed as well, federal, state, and local funding options that could fund different parts of these recommended improvements. And then lastly, we have some frequently asked questions based on the feedback from public input to try to clarify more of the reasoning behind some of the recommendations that people had questions about or concerns about. So that is all I have, and we are happy to try and answer any questions. I know Tim can also provide some backup Our engineers weren't able to attend tonight, but we will do our best to provide as much clarification as we can.
Folks were raring to go. I saw James's hand first.
Thank you for this presentation and for the incredible amount of work that's gone into this. I recognize that. One of my first questions is, we're doing this to, some of the recommendations are based on addressing the Urbana of 2045. Do you have maps that show where that projected population is going to be? Because one of the things, as I've had a lot of people call me and say they don't want those traffic signals, one of the things that's become clear is there's never been a good education process to help people who travel from campus to areas in Southeast Urbana as to what their options are and what might be a better path for them to take. We have the 4th Street development that is not used very well for commuting. We have Lincoln Avenue, which is used, but a lot of people just go straight into this trap of traffic at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 5 o'clock in the morning. So the population that we're planning for, where do you guys think it's going to be? What's the magic picture that is saying that all this traffic is going to go through here? Because I'm highly skeptical of that, because the population growth is not going to be in Ward 7. There can be some in Ward 6 or further east in Ward 5. But there are other paths that we could start to push people towards rather than trying to make this, I'm not going to say a Windsor Road, but Windsor Road Junior. And so can we get some of the information of what that 2045 picture is trying to address?
Sure. So
Not right now. You don't have to show me right now,
no,
but
that's
could we get
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I can send some links from the 2045 population and employment projections, but you are correct that in this immediate vicinity of Florida Avenue, there's not a great deal of population or employment projected to grow, because that is an area that's already pretty much fully built out. So the population that we're looking at isn't necessarily right there. The traffic, however, is going to all places around there, and so it is a major corridor. And so some of the increases in traffic that we're seeing there are due to employment and population that isn't right there, but is maybe adjacent to there in the University District or further east in Urbana, or even all the way to Champaign, given that this is a corridor that connects all the way through the region.
And we know there's not another good corridor until you might call Springfield a corridor, but really it's all the way to University to have a real corridor, right?
Right.
East-west.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to know that. It does feel to me that this is highly vehicle-focused. And I think when I hear what's said and how it's talked about, it feels like it's highly vehicle-focused. It talks about managing the wait times for vehicles. I don't see a lot. Is there going to be more information about the impact on pedestrians and bicycles? Because lights are not good for that.
Well, it depends.
In general.
So for bicycles and pedestrians, we do have, and we've created in-house, a lot of tools for trying to measure current facilities for bicyclists and pedestrians. So some of those can be seen on our existing conditions portion. And I won't scroll through the whole thing for you. But just to point out where it is, in our existing conditions, we do have bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and also levels of service and levels of traffic stress measured. And these are based on other tools from other communities. Unfortunately, there aren't any nationally recognized tools to measure bicycle and pedestrian quality or future projections like there are for vehicles, because the history of our transportation system is very vehicle-centric, and there's a lot of tools and research that's already gone into that. So for bicycles and pedestrians, we have a lot fewer tools to project that. And also, even though we do have a lot of bicycle and pedestrian use in our community, more than the national average or the state average, vehicles still make up the vast majority of our transportation system, and they account for the vast majority of our traffic crashes and congestion at intersections. So our tools are pretty heavily focused on vehicles, but there is a good reason for that because they do have the largest impact on the system. At the same time, we do look at the whole system in terms of improvement. So we are looking at, our internal calculations of level of traffic stress for bicycles and pedestrians, and also level of service for those things. Those are tools, like I said, that we built in-house, with time and research, but those aren't tools or, nationally available tools for things like that. So we do our best, and we're trying to, complete the network, like in this map of existing bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We're really working on completing this network and making it connect, to the existing side paths, looking at where it's appropriate for on-street and off-street facilities, how we can make intersections safer and clearer. For instance, the Ray Street intersection, we did get a lot of complaints from bicyclists and pedestrians about how confusing it was and how they didn't feel safe crossing that many lanes with people going at different times. Signals will hopefully at least clarify some of that by giving pedestrians dedicated time to cross and giving a designated space to bicyclists as well. So we only have so many tools for improving an intersection. Currently, it's always stop. Roundabouts and lights or signals were really our only other two alternatives. So those are the ones that we really looked at.
All right, I'll tell you, these questions are coming from 22 years of living just off of Vine Street and all of that time commuting homes to Race to Florida, either to Champaign or to campus. So I've been watching this whole time. Also Vine Street as the primary corridor to get to downtown Urbana. This does feel like it's focused, though, mostly on the 60 to 90 minutes, 5 days a week of what we would call rush minute, I think, around here. And I can tell you that all other times, there's not a congestion issue.
Sure.
And so are we going to change the nature and the quality of the residential area of Florida between Race and Vine and further east there to address that relatively small period of time each day that people get frustrated waiting to turn left on Race or get through that intersection? That seems, I do, I've heard people ask me about the roundabout possibility. I understand the constraints from a cost standpoint and a property standpoint. It's not lending itself to that. But I think some of the stuff that's in the guide here is not consistent with what I've seen out in the world about the safety of roundabouts for bikes and pedestrians. I mean, I hear from bikists and pedestrians that say this is what they want for their safety based on what they think they need. It kind of ignores that and a body of work that's out there that talks about that. This may not be the place to do it, because of the price, but I'm really worried that there's never going to be that first place that it should be.
Sure.
Because everybody's waiting for the perfect conditions. I was here and on the county board when they talked about doing it at North Lincoln Avenue when they were improving that area. And frankly, the farmers didn't want to drive their combines around a roundabout. And that was a fair piece of feedback. But I don't know where the first one's going to be. And I keep driving over to Indiana and being envious of that neighbor state who's not known for progressive policies being ahead of us in this particular case.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just comment on a couple things there. While we do use peak hour traffic in some ways to measure flow through an intersection, we don't have a congestion problem per se. That's not the problem we're trying to solve. What we're really trying to solve is safety, particularly at that Race intersection where it's most urgent. So while we talk about flow, it's not really about congestion. It's really about moving vehicles safely through the area without conflicts with other modes or with other vehicles. So that's the primary concern rather than congestion. I will also say it does feel like, you know, every intersection is different. So there's never going to be a, you know, perfect roundabout intersection per se. It's not that roundabouts are impossible here, but given the other conditions, we don't think it's necessarily the best approach. That said, you know, a lot more money could be invested to maybe figure that out. You know, we didn't do a specific design analysis. We looked at general right-of-way acquisition needs, general diameters of roundabouts to make that assessment. But admittedly, we went into this thinking that roundabouts would probably be the outcome because, you know, we know there's some support that's been building kind of gradually. We know that's a good safety option in a lot of areas. It just didn't seem to work out here. We have included roundabouts as part of other recommendations and other studies. It just didn't feel like the best approach here. And I will say, you know, this was also done in conjunction with other agencies. You know, the university has a stake in this roadway, MTD as well. So this is also about their concerns for their properties and vehicles as well. But I do know that the university is currently looking into a roundabout location near this corridor, which I can't speak on and shouldn't, it's not my project. But I do know that this is not a lost cause or anything. This just wasn't where we landed for this particular corridor.
I'd just like to kind of tail off that real quick. Just some of the data on safety for roundabouts for cyclists and pedestrians. There's no quantitative data that supports that it's safer than a signalized intersection at this point. There's qualitative support that it potentially is, but there's nothing out there that proves that this is. There's also other things that are tied to this that are also qualitative, not quantitative, for accessibility, for handicap accessibility for these things, because you're increasing the travel ways and things like that, or if you're shortening the distances of crossing, you're expanding the space needs and things. So there's just not a well-defined tool to say this is sure and fast the right answer. And one concern talking to transportation engineers about this stuff is, you know, with the roundabout, there's not a phased control for that. So people are all going to be moving at the same time, and there's merges that have to happen. And for cyclists in particular, typically with roundabouts, you're either forced into the lane of travel or forced to follow the pedestrian, come off-road if you're on-road, and follow the pedestrian pathway, which is sometimes also a concern for that.
Other questions? I think I'd seen Mary Alice next. You're good, Chris? Okay, go ahead, Chris. Everyone's so nice tonight. All right, we'll go on this side. Chandra.
Okay, so I have a question. Why doesn't the Lincoln, Florida intersection get better in the different series? Like, it's still D or C and D. It does, and while the other intersections with a light or a roundabout, those got better grades. Why doesn't this intersection get better?
Improve? Yeah, that's a good question. Mostly because that's the biggest traffic volume intersection, and that volume stays consistently higher than the other ones. So that at a certain level, there's a certain amount of delay or inconvenience or crossing time that just can't be shortened or improved there because it's still a signal and it's still a very large intersection. I also am not sure whether the projections showed larger or smaller increases for that particular intersection compared with the other ones. But in short, I think just the changes are different in the sense that that level of service is always going to be slightly lower just because it has so much more traffic than the other ones. And there's several lanes. It's a larger amount of distance to cross for pedestrians, so it's always going to be, I mean, it's never going to be like an A. It's never going to be super quick to get through for all modes.
Okay. And then why does a roundabout cost so much money?
Great question.
Like $2 million? That's
a lot of that is tied to the sheer size of it that is needed, in addition to land acquisition. Land acquisition costs is something that's not necessarily a major need with a signalized intersection, but with a roundabout, when you expand this out, especially if you're trying to shorten the crossing distances for pedestrians and stuff, that grows even more, as well as creating a center island that's traversable for freight, for buses. All of this continues to expand this out. It's a sheer size thing is generally the issue, and pavement's very expensive. So
is that the costs like today because stuff is expensive, or like 5 years ago it was $2 million too?
Historically, roundabouts are much more expensive than signals.
And I would agree with the comment of the turn radius from Vine onto Florida. Like, that would definitely need to be solved because, I mean, yeah. So that would be something that's fixed because you'd be rebuilding the entire street essentially, correct?
The street
Okay.
and the intersection design would be improved with the installation of new signals.
And so if, I'm trying to think back to your recommendations, scroll through, the Orchard signal, was it recommended that stay or go?
Stay.
And just to upgrade the lights?
Correct.
Okay, and so it'll be a signal there and then a signal, so 3 signals between Lincoln and Florida? Or
Vine would be included.
Fine, okay, so 4 signals, okay. And so there is nothing else besides a traffic signal that could do what needs to be done? Because people they don't want the traffic signals.
Mhm.
So, and there's nothing else.
That or roundabouts are essentially our only options for upgrading an intersection to make it, more navigable for more vehicles or to accommodate more modes in like a consistent way with rules and, to reduce conflict more than because it's either an all-way intersection, signals, roundabouts. Those are kind of the main categories we have. We don't have tons of unlimited options. Obviously, there's some variation in there, but those are our basic options, yeah.
Is there a way to test it out before permanent, like get those temporary lights to see how how things go? I mean, granted, the street won't be wider or fixed or bike lanes or whatever, but at least we could see how cars perform with lights up there.
I think the physical constraints limit our abilities to do that, at
Okay.
least at the Ray Street intersection for sure.
Okay.
Vine Street, we've got a little bit more play, but I don't think Vine Street's the major issue there. Ray Street's kind of the major issue there, and we've got some physical constraints of where we can put stuff at. As the space needs for signals is very minute and compared to roundabout, but they would still probably have some very minor needs to get the other infrastructure built around signals and mast arms and things of that nature that are needed for this.
Okay.
So I don't know a good way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Thank you for the presentation. As James said, thank you for all the work. This is amazing. But it basically doesn't matter if we don't have money to pay for it. Tim, in past capital improvement presentations, the $11 million to do this project was kind of counted as on its way from the federal government. What I'm hearing tonight for the first time is we don't have the money, or could you just maybe, summarize where we're at with the money?
Sure. So for our budget, when we're pursuing grant funds and things, we have to project that as income if we're going to even project expending that. Otherwise, it would show that we're depleting our funds by $8 million. So we project that as revenue and project it as expense, and they're tied together. So being as the grant was not awarded, the revenue is gone, so the expense cannot be made.
So, so it costs $12 million estimated total for all these great recommendations, whatever they may be. And what I'm hearing tonight is we don't have the city of Urbana can't do it necessarily without dramatically altering our capital improvement plan for the next 5 years. So is there a plan to reapply for grants, or where are we at?
Yeah, the intent is, and I kind of touched on it earlier, but the intent, these opportunities are still going to be there. To a degree, at some point, we're going to have to talk about what makes sense. are we gonna hold out for 20 years and do no project while we wait for funds, or are we gonna try to piecemeal this and do an intersection and maybe a rehabilitation project, or, you know, where are we gonna get with that? And I think there's different levels of that, but it kind of depends, and there's certainly some more information tied to that stuff. We have other grant opportunities that, you know, this is an eligible project for in certain capacities. The shared use path, we're already pursuing the ITEP funds to potentially get it constructed with ITEP funds aside from this, which would come out of that 12 million. There are some HSIP funds that are also eligible for like the Ray Street intersection improvements that we could pursue. You know, there are other ways to do this, but holistically, we need a good holistic plan, so we build it so that the end product makes sense for us.
Thank you.
Barry Alice?
Thank you. I'll just say kudos again. You did a really nice job of summarizing everything. The question I have, so everybody's been talking about roundabouts. I'm just looking at those 4 separate intersections. In my opinion, the only actual intersection that you'd be able to get enough land would be at Lincoln and Florida. Certainly Race, it would make sense to put a roundabout at Race if the land was okay, but those houses are really close to the intersections. I don't know how that is feasible. I was also wondering about, you know, we basically have sidewalks, road construction, and the little kind of extras with the cutouts and the parking and so forth. So my question is, how much is the road reconstruction? Like, out of the $12 million, what are we talking about with the road reconstruction? Tim?
Way to put me on the point there. I'm going to speculate here because I'm not going to have a perfect number, but the full road reconstruction, which now, you know, would be inclusive to Wright Street Extended, I'm going to say of the 12 million, you're probably looking at not signals. You're not talking about signalizing the intersection?
I'm not talking about signals at the moment.
Okay, so just talking about pavement, you're probably looking at, I'm going to guess, slightly over 50% of the total project. Somewhere between 50 and 75% of that total project is pavement reconstruction. And when I say pavement, I'm including curb and gutter with pavement, as they would have to go hand in hand, and sidewalks would be kind of adjacent to that then.
So that's my other question. Is it possible to fix the sidewalks on the north end before fixing the road, or does that not make sense?
No, and I think a lot of like the sidewalk repairs on the north side of the road, those can probably be done at any time. The priority for them versus other things is it's just not as high a priority, but it's not something that couldn't be addressed at any time, because that's less full sidewalk reconstruction and more spot repairs. So we're replacing 30 or 50-foot sections where we have non-compliance issues, but we may have 20 of those sections throughout the roadway. It makes sense to pair it with this project, but it could certainly be a standalone maintenance improvement type effort.
And so of the grants that you're thinking about applying for, what is the ETA in terms of decisions for those grants? Are we talking 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? What is just a rough estimate?
Well, the other challenge with that is there's going to be new grants next year somewhere.
Sure.
You know, like we don't even know about them yet. But essentially, like with the RAISE grant, we were informed about it May-ish, I think, and the application was due in September. Or, sorry, that's backwards. That's the SS4A now. Yeah, we've only had a few months at this, but the RAISE grant, the sound is that it's going to be coming back around again next year. My thought is we're going to be hopefully more prepared for this project and potentially have the Lincoln Corridor study in a point where we can contiguously apply for both those. So both the RAISE grant would be applicable to those and the SS4A would be applicable to those, as well as HSIP funds, which are recurring funds that are available through the state annually, federal and state annually. There's another different opportunities. Our MPO funds, you know, the original plan for this was that $3 million from the MPO funds was going to be dedicated to this, which could still be a thing, but if we've got to pick up the other $9 million as the city, that is where the challenge lies, where we could talk about, are we piecemealing this? What parts are we doing? And what parts really constitute applicability to the MPO? Because the MPO, that's a pool of money that we use regionally, and we have grading systems for the different projects and community needs. So as Florida Avenue stands from Vine to Lincoln, it was prioritized in that project to get funding for that thing. certain parts of that could certainly still be eligible for that. And we had still intended on using some of those funds to complete this.
And do you know what the estimated time for the one that we just did with the multi-use path on the south side?
Sorry, the ITEP?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know the applications are due at the end of this month, and Rita probably knows more than me. Do you know when the awards are made on that?
That's a difficult question to answer because IDOT takes their time to make the announcements. Usually within a year of submitting the application, the application is due at the end of September 30th, and usually within a year we get a response from IDOT. And the idea, the way that, let me use the microphone.
So far, what we've heard is that usually it's within a year.
Usually within a year, we hear from them, and the way that we are applying for the shared use path on Florida Avenue is to start construction, to start preliminary engineering and all that within a year of getting the funds awarded, to get those done within 2 to 3 years. Then hopefully, if we get the funding within 3 years, we should have the shared use path built. That's the idea.
All right, so best case scenario, there would be a shared use path on the south side within 3 years.
Hopefully, if we get the
Best-
funding.
Best case scenario.
Best case.
Okay.
And I will just say just in general, when we do a planning study, it never comes with implementation funds. The point is to figure out what the priorities are so that we can then kind of start this process of setting aside funding or applying for grants. So unfortunately, we could come up with a fabulous plan, but it's usually going to take a while for it to be implemented.
The other thing that I would like to mention, that Tim mentioned it, is the HSIP funding, because Race and Florida have been identified by IDOT as a critical intersection since 2017. They are pushing the MPO to get that intersection fixed in terms of safety. Then there is HSIP funding that is 90-10, 90% federal funding, 10% local match, that can be used to improve that intersection. And I can tell you, probably we are 90% sure that we'll be getting the funding if we apply for that funding. The grants, the HSIP grants open around March, June, between March and June, and within a year, we hear from IDOT about it. Then if we apply next year, we should be getting back from IDOT within 6 months. And then if the funds are awarded, which is probably the case because it's a high priority intersection for IDOT, then we can proceed with improvements at that location.
So it sounds to me like there's a high likelihood that we will get funding for at least the race piece, the race and Florida piece. I understand having a holistic look at the project and, what do we want to do here? But in terms of at least the priorities that I've heard tonight, it seems like that race intersection and bicycle safety seem to be the top two things that I'm hearing tonight. And having the multi-use path and potentially the race would be 2 to 3 years out, which is a long time. So I'm wondering if there are other ideas in terms of at least bicycle and pedestrian safety that we could consider. So that I suppose that I don't expect you to answer that off the top of your head. And just a small thing, I know that there are concerns, it sounds like there's concerns about having 4 different lights at these intersections. I guess if that is the plan, I've been in cities where everything is timed to 30 miles an hour, and that is another way of calming the traffic. So as long as you drive 30 miles an hour, you're basically going to go right through those intersections. That would have a bonus on both sides. So, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess my question too is regarding the multi-use paths. These are paths where people would be riding a bike and walking?
Correct.
In the same
10
area?
feet, 10 to 15 feet, depending on the actual implementation.
And so would you have to annex anyone's property in order to make that happen?
Currently for that location, that's on university property, and we've been working with the university, and they're currently in support of this. They haven't always been throughout history, but right now we do have their collaboration on this project. And so, yeah, we're hoping that we're able to move forward, you know, with that one in particular, because the university, it's their land and they're a partner in this project.
Okay, so I guess my next question is this then. If it's university property and I'm thinking, because I don't know, I used to go to U of I and I used to ride a bike on U of I. And I'm really thinking in terms of how they have a separate path for the walking and a path for the riding. And I don't know how about anyone else, but I know there are a couple of times where I almost got hit by a bike. So I guess I just don't trust that a bicyclist will be any more courteous or respectful of a pedestrian than a car person is. And the shared use is great, but I think it would be even safer for a pedestrian and a cyclist if since you're talking about 10 to 15 feet, that you would have those separated. I'm not an engineer, but it does, that does come to mind to me. And since it's university property, I'm sure they could understand that being used exactly the way it's used on university property, actually.
It's my understanding, I mean, generally going forward, it's a single shared path is kind of the standard practice. I know they still have some separated paths on campus. I don't know that that's a practice they're continuing throughout campus. That isn't currently the plan. There could be, sometimes those paths are striped. I mean, there certainly could be treatments to kind of designate who belongs where. But we haven't gotten into that level of detail at this point. I don't know if separating the bike and ped paths would be an option, but I don't know if that's something that's come up in your discussions yet, Tim.
University hasn't had a specific opinion on that take of it. Just from a money perspective, it's just more money. So it's not impossible to do. It's just more cost to do it. So, which is something we always fight against.
Okay.
Any other questions? Grace?
Sorry, just the last thing, picking off of, I agree with Councilmember Hersey's concern with the shared use path. I was also thinking something similar, and I think that there could be cost-effective things, like you mentioned, just with the line designation or the little bumpy things down the middle, or some way of just kind of, even on the same construction path, having some separation. That's all. And thank you for putting this together. It's been a lot of work and public input in the making, and lots of urgent needs and emotional ways of transportation, so thank you for that.
Mayor Merlin.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. First of all, I want to thank publicly the University of Illinois for supporting the concept and the implementation of a shared use path on the south side of Florida Avenue. People have been asking for this for several decades, and the university until this point has always just been a flat no. Well, we reached an historical point a couple of months ago. We had representatives from the U of I, from the City of Urbana, from the Mass Transit District, from the Regional Planning Commission, and everybody is on board for the first time in my memory for a shared use path along Florida Avenue on the south side, including from the president himself, who lives on Florida Avenue, the chancellor's office, and everyone from there on down. So this is an historic opportunity for us to get this shared use path, and we need to put whatever effort we have to into that. And to Sharice's concerns and Grace's concerns, I think a good model, or at least example of what a shared use path with pedestrians and bicyclists on the same path can be seen on Race Street from Florida south to Windsor. That's probably 8 feet wide. It's bicyclists and pedestrians use it all the time, and it's a super highway for both, and I can tell you it seems to work okay. So compared to nothing, it's way better than nothing, and if it's 10 to 15 feet wide, this is going to be monumental. So I do want to thank the university for being open to this and actually actively supporting it, because that was never the case, at least in my memory. So I hope they're listening. But
Any final questions? All right, thank you very much for a very thorough report.
Thank you for your patience.
So our unfinished business item has been taken off the agenda, so we'll move on to new business. The first item is ordinance number 2022-09-037, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 2, omnibus. From
So this is really just a quick little bit of housekeeping. There were two time-sensitive items in Public Works for which we needed to amend the budget. Sorry. Oh. So the proposal for the streetlight asset management plan came in a little bit higher than anticipated, so we're asking to allocate an extra $10,000 there from the capital replacement and improvement fund. And in the local motor fuel tax, there's just a reallocation between a couple of projects, so delaying the Florida Avenue at James Cherry construction and then reprioritizing $155,000 to pavement patching and bituminous surface treatment. And maybe Tim can speak really quickly to the timing issues here.
Yeah, whoa, this one's way louder. Yeah, just some of the timing things. The streetlight asset management plan, part of that is it's still going to be a probably 6 to 8 month process to get that going. I know that's one of our council goals, is to get these asset management plans going, so we wanted to be able to cut them loose as soon as possible. That was just slightly above our estimate of $70,000 for that one. And then some of the time sensitivity comes in the patching and the bituminous surface treatment programs. The bituminous surface treatment, typically it is done in the fall. It can be done in the spring. The fall is kind of a more optimal time for that. So getting a contract approved with them sooner rather than later is better. It doesn't take long. Typically, this is like a seal coat treatment. You know, usually they're out there for a week or 2 weeks, but they get, 20 roads done in that time frame. But if we miss our window and get into the winter season, that's going to push us into potentially the spring or next fall on those things. That one, the bids came in slightly higher, very similar to many other things, about 20%. There are options with that one. That is a preventative maintenance program. The target for that is, because it's preventative maintenance, it should be something that we continue to do pretty regularly. Rather than cutting the program, I would opt to support staying on a reasonable cycle of doing this stuff so it can remain as a preventative maintenance rather than becoming a rehabilitation or reconstruction need. With that one, that's time sensitive to try to get it done this fall still. The other one is the patching program. We've got bids on that, and the primary section that we're pursuing our patching with would be that Race Street section south of Race in Florida, which I know was kind of on the outside looking in of our capital improvement plan. A lot of people had a desire to do that, and that was something that we felt we could target with patching funds. Again, the cost of doing so is more than our budget, but the budget that was created for that is more of a hypothetical budget that I created, saying we need to be doing this, but we don't know how much yet every year. And this project was identified to do the extent, so I would support pulling money to do the extents of this project rather than shrinking the project down in that section. I'd take any questions.
Grace?
Thanks. I had a few on this one. I'm glad we have Tim here, so thank you. With the street lighting, did you say that's because the bid came in higher? Like the memo here says because additional services requested by the city.
So the proposal was higher. I think the proposal was like $76K and we had 70. And then we asked them to do some other things that were more time sensitive on that. We've got deck lighting down at the parking deck that needs replaced, but we need some recommendations on the replacement for that. So we asked them, in addition to finishing this asset management program, is to also identify a replacement for that so we can do that in a time sensitive nature.
Okay. And this patching and the bituminous surface treatment, that's not the one with all the little pebbles that are, it is that?
The bituminous surface treatment is exactly what you're talking about.
Why? That's, okay, I think that's a whole other can of worms, but like, is there not a better way to do that?
It's
The aftermath is so terrible, like all the gravel for like months and months, and then it seems like the pothole's just like right back there.
I understand where you're coming from, but it's $3 a square yard versus the next. There are some other, I'll say, preventative maintenance things between there and mill and fill, but a mill and fill is probably going for $30 to $50 a square yard. So this is a way for us to keep the roads from crumbling faster, is essentially putting a seal coat or a Band-Aid on them to prevent dissipation of the roadway and deterioration from cracks into potholes. So it's truly a preventative maintenance treatment, but we're getting it for, $2 to $4 a square yard versus $30 to $50 a square yard. There are other means and methods between that and the other one, but they're very specific. You have to have specific candidates that are eligible for that, whereas a seal coat is eligible for almost the majority of all of our roads.
Okay, and I imagine you've estimated the cost and how long it lasts and all that stuff. What about sweeping up the little pebbles afterwards? Is that a thing that's part of it, or is that part of the process?
I'll give a little history here. So seal coats, when you see it on county roads and stuff, a lot of them for a long time were done with limestone, lots of dust, lots of gravel, things like that. And the way this works is they spray oil down, they lay aggregate down, and sometimes they do an A1, A2, or A3, which is just an additional lift of the same thing, more oil, more rock, more oil, more rock. But in urban settings like this, over the years, they've went from limestone, which is not pleasant with the dust and everything in an urban setting, and then they went to pea gravel, which is good but not great. It still deteriorates because limestone and pea gravel both deteriorate a little bit more rapidly than what we're using now, which is a steel slag mix. It's got a little bit more fines in it, but the steel, rather than being limestone or pea gravel, actually holds up better. And typically seal coats, you're seeing a 3 to 7 year life. I would guess with the slag seal, we're seeing more of like a 5 to 8 year life. What we're targeting now is hitting these roads on a 5-year cycle. When they started this program, they had some issues because the equipment couldn't sweep up the steel slag because it was heavier than limestone or pea gravel. But now what we've done is we've kind of spec'd that out accordingly so that gets done in a reasonable manner. There is still somewhat of a mess that's going to come with this. There's going to be some loose aggregate and stuff. And typically what happens is they lay this down, they roll it, they sweep it, they come back a week later, 7 to 10 days later, they roll it and sweep it again to try to pick up all the loose stuff. But there is an interim in there where it's just a little bit of melting time to get everything gelled up. But the steel slag, actually, the ride on it is so much smoother than some of the pea gravel and limestone that they used to use because it has some more fine particulates in it than some of the old stuff did. So I still highly recommend that treatment.
Thank you for answering the questions. I will say that it was absolutely terrible when that happened on our street. I feel like it was a pothole like this big, and then like all the gravelly stuff on the entire span of the road in like not the little spots. But I'm done with that piece for now. Last question.
Wait. I want to check. Are you talking about crack or spray patching versus this applies over the entire pavement width? You may be talking about spray patching. That's an oil and rock mixture to fix potholes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's a different thing. I'll just talk about spray patching real quick too while we're here. The spray patching is essentially kind of the same thing, but it's actually a better fix for potholes than the old method of putting cold mix in. The cold mix, typically the first freeze-thaw cycle, that whole thing pops out, the pothole's right back. The spray patch, because it's this blasted oil and rock mixture, it actually sets up and solidifies where water cannot infiltrate like it can in cold patch. So I hear you, it is a mess, but it actually holds up a lot better than the old methods that they used.
Yeah, I think my car's gonna last like a year or two less now after that. So is that what the pavement patching is?
Pavement patching is actual cutting out pavement and patching it.
Okay, and then the surface treatment is also different. So the terrible thing I'm talking about is not
Not
quite
on
the
this at
same
all.
as these
The
proposed. Okay.
terrible thing you're talking about is actually just a maintenance practice that we do in-house.
Okay. That was terrible. Okay. Other question was, what is the Florida Avenue at James Cherry construction?
There's a section of Florida to the east of Philo Road that was addressed during our prioritization process in this capital improvement planning for rehabilitation due to the condition and use of that roadway. Right now, it was projected for design and construction to happen in this year. I think we had, 120,000 for design, planning, engineering, and then about 500,000 for the construction. And I think the idea is, basically taking away from that to make sure we're getting our preventative treatments done. And then that would just push forward into the next fiscal year. We would do the design, engineering for that this year, and then the construction would be slated for the next year. We'd push it forward.
So it's for road repairs on Florida?
Yes.
There by James, okay. And last question was, when, with the maintenance, patching and surface treatments, are you still using the priorities system that you've shown us in the past for where we're doing those treatments?
So the bituminous surface treatments that we're doing, it's actually more on a cyclical thing. So what we've done is it doesn't make sense for to do prioritization in that because it's a preventative maintenance thing. Preventative maintenance we need to be doing continuously. We need to do it cyclically, and we need to keep up with it. So rather than trying to prioritize which roads need it first, we're going to try to get everything on at least a 5-year cycle so that we can hit it again with a preventative maintenance treatment before it's too far gone for preventative maintenance. Because what's happened in the past is sometimes something has to be done every 3 years, and then something doesn't get done for 10 years, and now we really can't do it cost effectively with the preventative maintenance treatment. So we're trying to get a nice median in there. So we've got essentially 5 sections that we're gonna work through each 5 section and seal coat all of those areas. In 3 years from now, we'll have hit everything in the city with the seal coat program that's already on the seal coat program and extended it out throughout the whole city. So nothing will have not been hit in less than 5 years.
Thank you.
Mary Alice?
So you kind of just answered one of my questions was the 5-year cycle. What is the amount of roadway that would be covered for a 1 year out of that 5-year?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get it to you. It's a lot. Would be the answer.
Well, when we're doing the seal coat, I'm assuming that when we asked for a request for cost, that we said 30 miles of roadway or 10 miles or 100 miles. I have no concept of what 155 covers in terms of roadways.
Yeah. Well, for reference, I'm trying to think of what our breakdown is, but I think I'm going to guess here, and it might not be right, but I think about 30% of our roadways are seal coat. So about 5% of our roadways per year is what that's covering, or 6% of our roadways that 5-year cycle would cover. But I can get you a better figure on that. I don't know off the top of my head. It's just we stretch our dollars much further with preventative maintenance than we do with rehab and reconstruction.
So that means we would be covering approximately 5% of our roadway every year?
I'll speculate on that, but I can get you a good number. 5 to 6%.
If it's close to 5, that's fine. I just
Yeah.
want a rough idea. And so the pavement patching and the surface treatment, I mean, you just said that the pavement patching was cutting out certain segments and replacing kind of, I'm going to call it a slab. I
Yep.
don't know if that's the phrase or not. So what is the proportion here? Is it 50-50, where 50% of the 155,000 is pavement patching and the other? I'm just trying to figure out what the split is.
It's 100 is towards pavement patching and 55 is toward the bituminous surface treatment.
Okay.
So the original budget for pavement patching was 250,000. We're increasing it to 350,000. And the original budget for the bituminous surface treatment was 125,000. We're increasing it to 180,000. The other thing we did, the LRC has a separate pool of money to pay for bituminous surface treatments of their roadways. They're in this cycle as well, and their bids were a little bit higher than their operating budget too. So we're looking to kind of cover, I think, $5,000 over what they had in their operating budget for that out of the CIP.
So it's 2/3, 1/3, basically.
Yes. Yep.
So does that mean that we would, if we're going to put something on a 5-year cycle, that says to me that we should expect increases in future fiscal years of requests to continue the program? Is that
Yeah,
kind of the plan
potentially.
right now?
Yeah, potentially. And I think the other thing here is historically we've had one bidder on bituminous surface treatment. We have one contractor that does it. These people, they don't cross county lines. It's like they have a handshake deal. I've tried to do it for multiple municipalities and bring bidders in, and it's kind of a special thing that not a lot of people do. But Ileana Construction is the one that does it here, And the other thing with them is the former ownership of that has, I think, been, I think the former ownership is out on that, and now they're part of Champaign Asphalt. They're under that umbrella. So there was a change in kind of management of that extension of the company,
Okay.
which could have been a result of the increase in price. But,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Any other questions? Can I get a motion? Chandra?
I'll make the motion to send ordinance number 2022-09-037, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 2 omnibus, to City Council with recommendation for approval.
Second?
Do you want that on the consent agenda?
I thought it was since it's a budget, it couldn't go in the consent?
It can't go on because it's a budget.
Since it's an ordinance,
Right.
maybe you should do a roll call.
Right. But it can't go on the consent agenda as well because it's a budget item. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Can it go on the consent agenda or no because it's a budget item?
I think it's, since it's a budget ordinance, you should do it separate.
Okay. It has been moved by Chandra and seconded by James to send ordinance number 2022-09-037, ordinance revising the annual budget, ordinance budget amendment number 2, omnibus, to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Next, we have ordinance number 2022-09-038, an ordinance amending City Code Chapter 5, Building, Fire, and Flood Safety Codes, with a presentation from Fire.
Thank you, guys. This is really a simple request for the fire department. Currently in our fire codes now, all third-party inspection companies who conduct inspections on fire protection systems like sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, things of that nature, are required to submit their reports to the fire department for review. In the absence of some staff and over COVID, we've got a large backlog of this. And this company, Brycer, that we're looking at contracting with, they really offer a no-cost solution to the fire department. They do an intake of all inspection reports, and they do the assessments on them, and in fact, they do part of the enforcement for us under our logos, if you will. They charge a small fee, $34 a year per system, and we actually would get a small revenue off of that. It's like 50% minus a 7% processing fee. But what this will do for us is it'll take several, what I would say probably a couple hundred man-hours a year, and take that off our plate and actually give us a good product. In the end, it's going to reduce our false fire alarms. It's going to increase the safety of all the public services within a building. So that's our request. This request would just basically be an amendment to the current fire code to allow Brycer LLC to be our third-party intake. Guys, any questions?
All right, James?
So if we had the manpower and we were doing it, what would we be charging these organizations to do this?
We don't have a fee in place to
So
charge.
this would be something that they haven't paid in the past?
This would be a new fee. The way it's designed is the fee is actually charged to the inspection company, not the business owner, but obviously that would
Yeah.
probably be passed on.
Okay, all right. And just to clarify, the 7% part, is that on the part that we would have gotten, or is that on the $34 overall?
Again, this is not something that we would have charged for in the past, and we
Sure.
haven't. This has just been something as we get the reports, we would review them, we would input them into our records management system, and then we would send out our normal enforcement notifications and send them through that normal process.
Okay, thank you.
Very welcome.
Mary Alice?
So, I'm sorry for not quite
No, this is a zero expense to the city. The way it works is Brycer, who does the intake, the processing, checks the reports, and sends out the notices of any deficiencies, charges the inspection company the small fee. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. All right, so basically they charge, in this case, a $34 fee, and every quarter we would get a small portion of that back as just a revenue share, which is 50% minus a 7% processing fee on their behalf.
So the other thing that I was trying to figure out was, is there any time limit, or is this in perpetuity? This is an ordinance. So this is city code.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, it would, it basically just allows us to input Pricer's name into our code to allow them to do the intake for us.
So this is perpetuity. This company, if we approve this, will forever until somebody takes it out of the code.
Yeah, there's an agreement that goes with it that spells out, like, we can get out of this if we want, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, it just seems like it would make sense to have something that would be a trial to see how it works.
Sure.
2 years, before we put it into our law, that says they should do it. My thought on it. It's not an intergovernmental agreement.
No.
This is a company.
Yeah, this is a company that we would have an agreement for service with.
Yeah, I'm
so-
sorry, was my mic
Oh, that's-
wasn't on, so.
I'm sorry.
So
yeah.
basically, my question was whether or not, if there was a time limit on this ordinance, and the answer, at least the way it's written, is no, there's not a time limit.
Not on the ordinance specific to the amendment to the building code, or the fire code, no. But what it does allow us to do, it allows us to enter into a written agreement for their service, so.
And
in
does the written agreement come to city council, or is the written agreement just?
I think,
I don't
Carol,
think
did
the
you want
agreement
to
does.
weigh in?
Maybe I can help a little bit, I hope. The agreement, I believe, is for 3 years. The reason, part of the way that the agreement is structured is that the jurisdictions that are participating with Brycer are required to pass an ordinance because Brycer becomes sort of our agent. They need to be empowered to impose this fee. So it does make it a little bit more problematic if we want to discontinue the relationship. But one of the things that we learned through this process is there is no direct competitor to Brycer.
Would it be possible to add in, if we have a 3-year contract, would it make sense to have it expire after 3 years after the contract? That way, if there's a new company, that we could, I mean, things can change within 3 years.
Sure. So
That
I
would be
think
my
it's just a
question.
question of pick your poison, right? So you either discontinue the relationship with Brycer down the road, and then you have to amend the ordinance, or you have a sunset, and you have to amend the ordinance to do whatever the next thing is.
I guess what I'm saying is it might trigger the next group of people if they know that this is going on, rather than just kind of letting it lie in the background. So I think, I don't know, I'm kind of in support of having a sunset on this, but that's my thought. And that's a discussion, not a question, sorry.
Sharice?
I guess my question is, what are we doing now exactly? How are we handling this issue right now?
We're not. We have such a backlog on these reports that come in. We literally have almost 2 years. We've been without the fire marshal's position for almost 2 years, and we were backlogged leading up to that. So we're really beyond what staff has time and availability to do. And when we researched this, we found this at literally a no-cost option to the city to help us. So that's why we pursued them.
And I guess I want to understand what kind of background Brycer LLC has in doing this type of work. In the, I don't know. I'd just like to see some more information, I guess,
Yeah.
about them.
I can brief you on that a little bit. Brycer's been in the business for a little over 10 years. They are an Illinois-based company. They represent over 4,000 fire departments across the country now, from small departments to major metropolitans, because there's a need for this. I mean, this is the work that's required to review these reports and things is really a burden on staff time. And they came up with a creative product, and it's very beneficial. I mean, for it to be a no cost to the city, that's and to me is worth itself. So, and in return, we get a little bit of revenue out of it.
Okay. That's basically it.
Yep. Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for this update. I agree, it does seem very specific to have the company in the code, but I understand if that's the way it has to be done. I was having trouble finding Chapter 5 of the code. On the Muni Code online, it just says the footnotes, it says it's available somewhere else. I didn't know if we could have that before next
Sure.
week, before the city council meeting. Just 'cause I'm curious in the rest of that chapter of the code. And I'm wondering what are the potential impacts to the community from this? Because we are going from no fee to $35 per system inspected, right? So if you could help us understand, maybe in like a scenario, say the city with all of its properties or a property owner renting apartment buildings or something, they've traditionally hired a third party to inspect their systems, and then they submit that free to the fire department directly, right? And now it will be $34 per system. Is that per like building? I don't understand how that works, and it seems to me that there's the potential that would maybe like de-incentivize people from doing those inspections, or is that still required? How closely is that monitored? I know we have a history of some buildings with just repeated fines for years and years over these safety things. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that aspect.
Yeah, sure. So the foundation of this is anyone who virtually has any association with a sprinkler system, for example, or any fire protection system in the state of Illinois has to be licensed by the State Fire Marshal's office. That is the point of contact where Brycer gets in contact with these companies, who's installing the systems, who's testing them, who's maintaining them. There's systems out there right now, frankly, that we have no idea in our city when the last time they've been inspected, especially post-COVID here, where we haven't gone out and done inspections on a consistent basis for 3 years. So what Brycer does is Brycer identifies all of the systems in our city. So it brings awareness to us and allows us to, I don't want to say enforce, that sounds harsh, but ensure compliance with their systems. Because, like I said, we've got systems that have not been inspected. We know that. You had multiple parts of your question there, so if you can remind me on the first part there, you were...
Sure. One was what counts as a system, like per building?
Yeah.
Or floor, or what's a system?
Systems would be fire protection systems, sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, kitchen suppression systems, even fire extinguishers.
I guess I'm asking the unit, though. Like, say the city's inspecting its fire systems. Is that a sprinkler system for this building, for Public Works, for every single building? Or is it like this is one system throughout the city?
No, it would be per building. So each building would have a separate system.
Okay.
So, for example, the entire city building would be one system, even though we have multiple pods of buildings within our campus.
Okay. And so what you've added there about potentially having less compliance is you think this will increase compliance because there's a company with the capacity to follow up and check and inspect these things. Is that right?
Yeah, it's their sole business practice. So whereas, in the city, under, fire prevention and risk reduction, we have, 50 different items on our docket, and this is just one piece of it. But it's an important piece. And, the best case scenario is we just increase safety to all of our buildings. I mean, take, for example, our downtown district. That's pretty important to our community, and making sure those fire protection systems are in proper working order and properly inspected, tested, and maintained, is just another way to ensure that, we protect our investments of our community. So.
And then also, for before next week, could we have a copy of the agreement that we're proposing
sure.
with this company?
Yeah.
It seems like an important piece to me, especially because the memo is very brief, you know, working on like 2 paragraphs here. And it sounds like what I'm hearing right now is that this company's doing a lot more than what I was thinking in the memo when it says that they directly upload it to the fire department.
Mhm.
Like at first I was coming in thinking this is just a submission thing, and I'm seeing, you know, a few words about intake review compliance checks, but I would like to know more about
Sure.
what this actually means and what they'll be doing.
Absolutely. We can get those out to you guys, and I'll send you the links to where our amendments are to our building codes, which is a buried link within our city's website, so I'll get that to you as well.
Thank you.
Chandra?
So you said this company finds the fire systems that maybe you, I don't know, are unidentified to you currently. How do they find them? Or are they reported? Why aren't they reported?
Yes, so to follow up on that, anyone who does an inspection, testing, or maintenance on a system has to have a license from the State Fire Marshal's office. This company gets all of their information from the State Fire Marshal's office.
Okay,
All
so
that
they
is-
have the time to like
Yeah.
go and
Yeah.
go to the state fire marshal? Okay,
Yeah.
all right, got it,
Sure.
thank you.
One thing I'll add too is, one of the things that you guys approved in our current budget is our new records management system in the city, which we just kicked off this last week for our next 6 months of implementation. But Brycer actually is proprietary to the company that we happen to contract with. So when Brycer goes in and uploads an inspection report, it automatically uploads to our records management system too. So there's not that additional step of having to do a separate intake, and so it helps us maintain that as well. So if there's something critical, it would pop up on our new inspections module or to-do list.
Mary Alice?
Can you estimate a maximum amount that a building owner would end up paying, since this would be a new fee? Would it be $200? Is it yearly? Is it?
Yeah, so it is yearly. I mean, that's, the code requires inspections yearly on
Okay.
fire protection systems. And you're talking sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems. If they're a restaurant, they'll have a kitchen hood system. 3 or 4 items
Okay,
max.
so
Most
between
places do
$100 and
two.
$140, roughly speaking?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Close.
Close enough? All right. Thank you. Any other question? Is there a motion?
I'll move for ordinance number 2022-09-038, an ordinance amending the city code, chapter 5, building, fire, and flood safety codes, be sent to city council with a recommendation for approval, also with more information that that's going to be helpful. But I think this would be helpful for us.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So moved by Sharice, seconded by James. Is there any further discussion? Mary Alice?
I'm wondering if council is open to the idea of having this sunset within 3 years of the expiration of this company. I'm not sure if that has to be done at city council, or if that could just be a straw poll here to see if there's support, but that's what I would like to see.
Grace?
I think that would make sense, since it is very specific with the company in the city code. I agree, that doesn't sit as well with me in perpetuity in the city code. So I would be down for some kind of a time limit or sunset understanding in there.
Sharice?
Or maybe we can add the language of to be renewed or something like that. Not necessarily sunset, but renewal in 3 years, or renewal with
Renewal has to come to city
service.
council?
Huh?
Renewal has to come to city council for approval?
Is something to that effect. I would be satisfied with that.
Do we want to do a straw poll, or is there a recommendation for additional language? Grace?
Would it be possible to do something along the lines like during the time period that the city contracts with Brycer? Is that still too vague? Because would a contract renewal have to come before council or not necessarily?
Well, the thing is, I'm sorry.
Sharice, go ahead.
The thing is that from what I'm reading is that it's a 3-year contract anyway. And so the contract is going to have to be renewed some kind of way, but I would feel more comfortable, like Mary Alice says, rather than have it in perpetuity, like automatic renewal, that it comes back to city council so that we can just, because nobody, you know, a lot of things can change in 3 years, including the cost of what their system might be, and that might cause some other problems with buildings, owners, and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of things can happen also in 3 years that we may want to discuss how, and who knows, there might be another business that could, you know, come up and provide the same kind of thing. So I think we should keep our options open. That's the main reason I'm looking at it, is that you keep your options open.
Mary Alice.
So my understanding from what you guys have been saying is that if we put this in the ordinance as is, that when the first contract or any future contracts come up for signature, we've already approved it basically with this ordinance. They do not come to city council. That's kind of my understanding of what's going on here. And I'm relatively fine with having the approval for the first 3 years. I hear what Councilmember Hersey is talking about in terms of a renewal. So I don't really know the answer in terms of the best way to do this. I don't know if Dave could potentially weigh in next Monday in terms of whether or not it would make more sense to have a sunset date or have contracts for the first renewal must come to city council. I'm not sure the best way to word that. So I guess I would, if council is okay with something along those lines, I would ask that Dave might be able to work on something.
I think my preference would be that we just have sunset language, and then we have to revisit it, rather than having this very specific situation where council is going to approve a contract, because that's not the norm.
All right, that works for me.
So the current motion is for approval. Sharice, do you want to?
With the additional sunset language added to the contract. Is that cool?
That's cool.
I'm cool with that too.
James, does that, you were the second? Works for you?
Like I said, I think we should keep our options open to somewhat.
Is there any further discussion? All right, so it's been moved by Sharice and seconded by James to send ordinance number 2022-09-038, an ordinance amending City Code Chapter 5, Building, Fire, and Flood Safety Codes with a sunset date in line with the contract for this period to City Council for approval. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. All right, next we have ordinance number 2022-09-039, an ordinance annexing certain territory to the city of Urbana, 114 West Anthony Drive, Champaign Asphalt Company, LLC. Got Kat.
Hello. I don't have much of a presentation, but I will pull up the location map for you guys. Okay. Staff requests that the City Council consider ordinance to annex 1414 West Anthony Drive into Urbana. The 8.17 acre tract is currently owned by Champaign Asphalt Company, LLC. The property is contiguous to the city limits across Interstate 74, and Champaign Asphalt purchased the property in 2010. They would like to build a new office building on the southern half of the property, which will require a new sanitary sewer connection to the UCSD. And the reason for this annexation petition is because in 1992, the cities of Champaign and Urbana entered into an IGA with the UCSD. That agreement provides new sanitary sewer connections, will be allowed for properties within corporate limits of respective cities or where their respective cities have entered into an annexation agreement. Subsequently, the UCSD passed an ordinance implementing the provisions of the IGA. So because this property is immediately contiguous to Urbana city limits, it can be annexed through an annexation petition. It would come into the city as IN2 heavy industrial zoning without a need for an annexation agreement. The property is currently assessed at approximately $375,000. At the current tax rate, the city of Urbana could expect approximately $5,000 in property tax per year as a result of this annexation. City Council has the following options in this case. Forward the ordinance to City Council with the recommendation of approval as part of the consent agenda. Forward the ordinance to City Council with a recommendation of approval with suggested changes, or forward the ordinance to City Council with a recommendation for denial. If the City Council elects to do so, it should articulate the findings supporting its denial. Staff recommends approval of the proposed ordinance and placement on the consent agenda. The applicants are here to make a statement on behalf of the request, and I can take any questions for staff.
Mary Alice?
So, you had said that the city of Urbana could expect $5,045 in property tax. Is that the city of Urbana only gets 14% of the property tax. Are you just talking about that it would be taxed at $5,045, or would the city's share be $5,045?
The latter.
The city's share would be 45. Okay, so it's their property tax bill total would be more than $5,000.
Yes, definitely. And
like,
you know, school district.
They got off well.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Grace?
I had the same questions as Mary Alice, getting into some number crunching things. Is there a difference in industrial versus residential taxing?
That is an
Is that
excellent
probably beyond the
question.
scope of this as well? But just when doing some of the same numbers, that comes out to, you know, almost 40-some thousand a year, like 11% overall total tax rate for that property. And I didn't know if that was different industrial versus residential.
The tax rate is not different. There's certain exemptions that are available to residential property owners that are not available to commercial property owners or industrial property owners. So, but the tax rate's the same.
Okay, so that makes sense. The rate's the same, but you're saying there are certain things that residential properties, a tax itself, that they would be exempt from.
Yeah, like a homestead exemption type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Kat, you mentioned they're going to build a new building on the south side, and there's going to be some sewage work to make that building work, right?
Yes, they'll have to connect to the UCSD sanitary
Okay.
sewer.
Is that the cost of that on the building owner, or is that something?
That's
we
on
do?
the building owner, the property owner, developer, yeah, not
Okay.
on the city.
Okay, thank you.
And there's just, you know, as a point of clarification, there's already infrastructure that runs through here. The roads are built out, the UCSD runs through this area already. If they had to extend sewer to get to this property, that would be much more costly for the property owner.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of ordinance number 2022-09-039, and ordinance annexing certain territory to the city of Urbana, 1414 West Anthony Drive, Champaign Asphalt Company, LLC, to City Council on the consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Moved by Chandra, seconded by Sharice. Is there any further discussion? Mary Alice?
The applicants are here, and I didn't know if they wanted to say anything. I was just going to suggest to
Yeah.
the chair.
Come on up.
My name is Andrew Harrington. I'm the attorney for Champaign Asphalt Company. So I've just prepared the petition for them. Thank you all for, for supporting your community, and I appreciate you having us here, and kept it short and sweet. There's really not much to it. They're just looking to build a new office building, and they've already had lines connected to the UC Sanitary District, but because of the intergovernmental agreement, I think in 1992, they're getting a new line for the new building. So they're going to annex into Urbana, and look forward to a great relationship, and that's really all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Chandra?
So will the name be changing?
Maybe. They're in the county, but yeah, I don't know. And they do a lot of paving, asphalt work, so I'm sure I know they've done a lot of projects in Urbana throughout their long history, and I'm sure they'll do more work if it works out. So absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
No, you're fine. Thank you. I like that. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, so it's been moved by Chandra and seconded by Sharice to send ordinance number 2022-09-39, an ordinance annexing certain territories to the city of Urbana, 1414 West Anthony Drive, Champaign Asphalt Company LLC, with a recommendation for approval on the consent agenda. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkins?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
That motion passes. Next, we have resolution number 2022-09-071R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois concerning certified housing inspection term of 2022 to 2023. Community Development, Sheila.
Good evening. This is a request to approve a contract for the certified housing inspections. We've done these for over 60 years with the University of Illinois. Due to some staff changeover, we were not able to complete a 3-year agreement that we've been working on with them. So we came to agreement to do 1 year, and then during this current fiscal year, we will work with them on getting a longer contract for the next term.
Any questions? James?
I will be abstaining from this discussion and the vote because of my employment with the University of Illinois.
Grace?
I will also be abstaining, working at the university, and I had a question too. Questions are all right. I can ask a question.
If you're abstaining, you probably shouldn't participate in the discussion either.
Yes, but a question versus discussion. No? No. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mary Alice?
I am not abstaining. I work at the University of Illinois, but this has nothing to do with my job at the University of Illinois. So I guess my question is, you said that we had a 3-year agreement with them. We can only fill 1 year, but then we hope to renegotiate a new contract. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our prior 3-year agreement expired June 30th. And so we did a 1-year extension because we're in the middle of doing the inspections now. But we're also in the process of negotiating with them for a 2 to 3 year contract.
Okay, so it's not that we're no longer going to do it.
No.
It's just that this is a contract timing issue.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. I understand that, and I'd be happy to make a motion. But I guess others have questions.
Chris?
What are we inspecting? Sheila,
The
can you-
certified housing units.
No, I know that, but
Like-
like, what are we looking for when we do that?
Code requirements,
Just building code?
Mhm.
We're
Property
not-
maintenance code, building code.
We're not veering into fire code or anything like that, are we?
Probably somewhat, but like probably sprinkler systems, fire, smoke detectors, that kind of thing. We're not getting deep into that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mary Alice, do you want to make your motion?
I will make a motion. All right, I move resolution number 2022-09-071R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois concerning certified housing inspections for the term of 2022 to 2023 to City Council on the consent agenda.
And I second it.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Just want to make sure the record shows for the clerk that I abstained.
Conflict of interest? Okay,
And same for me.
yeah.
Actually, it's not conflict of interest.
I actually just have conflict. Is that okay?
Okay, I don't have to specify, but it is because.
If you want to, yes.
It's because it's my employer, and they've asked me not to vote on things related
Okay.
to their business.
I'll change it to that.
Thank you.
Same thing for you, Grace. Okay.
Okay. Next, we have resolution number 2022-09-072R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of an Illinois Arts Council Agency IACA grant for public arts programs operating support FY 2023 Urbana Arts and Culture Program. And Sheila, I'm guessing that's you as well.
Yeah, this is a grant that we apply for annually, and this year we were awarded $8,600. And so we're asking for approval of acceptance of the grant. It is just for program support. There's no designation for specific project.
Any questions? Grace?
Not thinking fast enough on my feet. I lost my question where I wrote it down. We're still looking for internally Urbana Public Arts person, right? Does that impact this?
No, it does
Anyway?
not impact this. Mm-mm. But
Okay.
yes, we will be starting the search soon.
Because there's still others, is that's in your department? You're saying even though that our one main staff person for the arts and cultures program is not with us, that there's other
Right, we have
staff
other
and board?
expenses, yeah, we have staffing cost, and we also have grants that we're implementing, and we have a temp person that is helping us implement the grant cycle that was previously approved in April by the Arts and Culture Program, so.
Thank you.
Sharice?
I would like to move for resolution number 2022-09-072R, resolution authorizing acceptance of an Illinois Arts Council Agency, IACA, grant for public arts program operating support, FY 2023 Urbana Arts and Culture Program, to be placed on the consent agenda for, and move to City Council for approval.
Second.
Moved by Sharice and seconded by Mary Alice. Is there any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have resolution number 2022-09-073R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a DCEO Generate Energy Savings Program grant, Matthews Avenue Street Lighting Project.
Yeah, this is a project that is complete, and we received notice probably 3/4 of the way through the project that through the legislature, we have been designated an additional $93,000 to help cover the cost. We have, like I said, completed the project. This will allow us to accept the grant, and we'd like to use it for future capital improvement projects.
Any questions for Sheila? Is there a motion?
I will move resolution number 2022-09-073R, resolution authorizing acceptance of a DCEO Generate Energy Savings Program grant for Matthews Avenue Street Lighting Project. Yeah, I know, that's what I was just.
It's Matthews Street, so sorry about that.
I was,
I'll
that's why I was
correct that.
hesitating.
Yeah.
To City Council on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
So I have moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Sharice to send ordinance number 2022-09-073R, resolution authorizing acceptance of a DCEO Generate Energy Savings Program grant, Matthews Avenue or Street?
Avenue.
Street Lighting Project. trying to clarify.
It's Avenue.
It's Matthews
Avenue
Avenue
Street
Street Lighting
Lighting.
Project.
Perfect. To the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, and then we have resolution number 2022-09-074R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a DCEO grant, Community Development, Violence Prevention, and Administrative Costs.
We received notice the first part of August that we had been awarded through the legislative process $2 million to be used for community development, violence prevention, and administrative cost. We've broken down how we're recommending the funding: $1.5 million for capital improvement projects, $250,000 for affordable housing, violence prevention programs of $200,000, and then $50,000 to cover administrative cost.
Chandra?
So these are kind of broad categories. Do you have an idea where they're actually going to go? yet?
The violence prevention programs, we will issue grants applications like we do for others. We'd like to have them be bigger awards, so maybe issue a couple, for a maximum amount of $100,000 rather than several smaller ones. The affordable housing, we've got a couple of developers that have approached us to do some affordable housing projects, and we would like to dedicate the money to that project.
Okay.
And then the capital improvement projects would be administered by Public Works, so it could be used for a variety of things, including fire departments, street improvements, lighting, any capital improvement project.
Any other questions? Mary Alice?
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on the community development capital improvement projects, is this an opportunity to expand the Equal program that we had for, right? It was called the Equal program that we had $2 million. So is this an opportunity to expand that particular program?
That's a possibility. The fire stations are a possibility. I mean, I think it's yet to be determined exactly what we'll spend this on.
So will there be a process? How will it be decided that this is spent on it? Will there be a group of people that decide? Will it be decided internally? How is that decision made?
We'll bring final contracts or approval to you.
Okay, so it'll come to city council with recommendations on how to spend the money per these 4 different categories. And then do we have to designate these categories now in order to accept the grant?
Yes, because I have to completely.
Okay, all right, I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get my process down. Thank you.
Yeah.
Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this with us. I love all of the utilization of grants, and I think this is a great one. $2 million in community development, violent prevention is awesome. So thank you for everyone who made that possible. I was wondering, what is the course of the grant period? What time frame is the grant period? Because it says it's for reimbursements for city costs for projects during that period.
During the grant period. I am guessing it's through June 30th of 2024. That's typically what the states are. It goes 18 to 24 months.
And starting now, like not retroactive?
We got, like I said, we got the notice August 1st. Once I get this approved and can enter the budgets in, then it'll go to the state for starting their process. And that can take 3 months.
Okay, so you need the buckets of how much we're going to spend on what for accepting the grant in this first step, and then you're saying the details of what projects get reimbursed from this will come up again later.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have go ahead. A question for kind of whether I need to recuse myself. I think this is a grant that the organization I work for may apply for. And I feel like it probably would be best for me to abstain at this point. So I just want to kind of, I guess, state that's my intention, is to abstain from this vote. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve resolution number 2022-09-074R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a DCEO grant, community development, violence prevention, and administrative costs for approval to City Council on the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Chandra and seconded by Sharice for resolution number 2022-09-074R, resolution authorizing acceptance of a DCEO grant, Community Development Violence Prevention and Administrative Costs. On the consent agenda, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, now we have council input and communication. Chandra.
I got an email about the school district's decision of putting the Spanish dual language program in one building or the other, Leal School or Dr. Williams School. And so I guess on October 6th, at Dr. Williams Elementary, October 6th, Thursday evening, 5:30 to 6:30, they're having a community roundtable conversation about whether it's going to be Dr. Williams or Leal Elementary. So either school will turn to the Spanish learning environment. So the neighborhood schools, if they're not enrolled in that dual language program, they will have to sort of, I guess, give up their neighborhood school and go somewhere else. So I'm encouraging folks in the Dr. Williams neighborhood, which is my ward over there by Learman, to go to this community roundtable to voice your concerns or excitement either way about the dual language program being at Dr. Williams or Leal. So I just wanted to pass that information along.
Any other comment? Do I have to pass the chair to make a comment? No? No, I was just going to make a comment. Okay. I just wanted to say I had the honor of representing the mayor for an event for Welcome Week on Saturday, for some awards for some incredible community members and community organizations. It was truly inspiring to see so many of our community members coming together to support immigration and immigrants in our community. I think it's one of the many things that makes this community strong. And as someone who is the child of an immigrant, was truly touching. So thank you to our community. Any other comments or communications? Mayor Merlin.
I just wanted to recognize the passing of Nick Halanyak Jr., who basically invented the LED and by doing so lit the world. And he was a resident of Urbana and certainly a pioneer that's changed our lives. So condolences to his family.
For sharing that. Any further communication? All right. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.